The Cleveland Browns absolutely screwed the pooch when it came to Baker Mayfield this offseason. We're going to tell you why on today's episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, football fans? It is another episode of Locked On NFL, your daily podcast covering everything you need to know around the National Football League in right around 30 minutes. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day every day. We appreciate you being here with us, where you can find us on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And we are your hosts. It's a Friday here over at Locked On NFL, another slightly differently melanated Friday, because Q is out today. We've got Chris Carter at Carter Critiques, Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola here with you on this wonderful Friday morning to get you ready for the weekend. And of course, look back at what happened Thursday night. That's where we're going to start off today's episode, Chris. Baker Mayfield kind of shook up the way that we're looking at the Cleveland Browns offseason a bit Thursday night, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You come into this game, and he didn't have a great game, but he had a hot finish. And the thing is he had a hot finish against a team that just won 3 games in a row. He had just gotten there 2 days before, literally hopped off the plane, was like, what's the play calls, gets in the game, and then leads 2 touchdown drives in the last 5 minutes of the game to win. And the last one coming with a 20-yard pass or something like that to Van Jefferson in the end zone, pulling off an improbable comeback. It's just and on a team that's been bad this year. That's the other thing. It's not like it's not like Aaron Donald carried him to the win. He didn't play, right? And it's not like Cooper Kupp was just catching ridiculous passes because he didn't play, right? And Baker Mayfield makes this happen, and it makes you wonder. You go back and you look at the Browns and how they handled this offseason. Q and I talked about that a lot this year, but them bringing in Deshaun Watson and forcing out Baker Mayfield, just finding a way to not handle this the right way. And there's certainly things I think Baker Mayfield could have done better about this. He didn't have to release the memorandum that he put out on Twitter with everything. But at the same time, like, you look at the Browns and you traded away all them draft picks,
spent all that money
on a dude who just played his first game, who was terrible against the worst team in the NFL. They found a way to win because their defense scored twice and their special team scored once. You found a way to do all of that, and the dude that you let go, it just won a game over there for this random team over here that's been struggling this year. So I look at it and it makes me just to shake my head at just how bad that situation was managed. And now you got to wonder, what is Baker Mayfield's future? You were starting to think, after getting cut by the Panthers, is he about to fall into obscurity? And here he is on Thursday Night Football, lighting it up and talking with the Thursday Night Football cast after the game.
And where he called out that Raiders defense too, came right for him, said, "Wow, man, what are they doing?"
I mean, that was some shots fired, basically on he was saying, like, I didn't understand why they were in press coverage, going into like when the game's on the line, there's 15 seconds left. He's like, I don't know why they're in press coverage. And it was just like, my goodness, like, you did not need to come for this training staff or this coaching staff like that.
That's actually why Q isn't here today.
Q's too busy handling the fire over there right now. Like, it's because I'm sure right now Josh McDaniels is going through it, and we'll get into them in a bit. But still, for him to recognize something like that, and you know what, he's been looking like a guy that you could legitimately say was a bust. Because he was the first overall pick. He still is a bust. I mean, you're first overall and you're not the franchise cornerstone, you were a bust. But when you're trying to show people that, hey, I still belong in the NFL, and people are trying to push you out, I think that says something. And again, I think it also says something that the franchise that brought you in and it hasn't exactly like taken off this year. We'll see how Deshaun Watson will have time to grow. He didn't play football for 2 years.
Right. But yeah, there is some rust to knock off and all that. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm just saying this is a rough spot for the like that was not something that Browns fans unless you're a big Baker fan, that's not something that I think made too many Browns fans smile last night.
Yeah. Look, I think this is just the perfect next step in Baker Mayfield's story. The guy was a walk-on at Oklahoma. Everybody looked down on him. Everybody was, he had the police video and all of this stuff. Like Colin Cowherd would never stop talking about it, like all that. And then like Baker Mayfield versus Colin Cowherd as he came into the NFL, all of that sort of publicity around him. And then his time with the Browns was so tumultuous, ended in kind of not really disgrace, but certainly unrest, I guess I would say in a way. And then going from that to the Carolina Panthers and the way that whole situation worked out, where Carolina had like 6 different quarterbacks on their roster that they were trying to juggle.
Jeez.
And yeah, he was just set up to kind of fail there. And then, getting waived by that same team. And then now ending up, of all places, in Los Angeles, where Matt Stafford's dealing with injury. He's basically shut down for the rest of the season now, with Baker Mayfield, of course, getting the opportunity there. They were looking at other guys like John Wolford, who had been there like kind of long time backup. We've seen Wolford take several snaps, even in the Jared Goff days. And then, of course, you saw even Bryce Perkins get opportunities there. And then Baker Mayfield comes in kind of as this street free agent, effectively. He was on waivers, but, he's coming off the street. And I like the way that our dude, John Hickman, over at Locked On Texans said it. He put on a game jersey before he put on a practice jersey. Like, that's the way that it feels. And he went out there and leads this like game-winning drive. You know what I mean? You think about the two people that we've watched lead game-winning drives this week are Tom Brady and Baker Mayfield. Like, this just really feels like Baker Mayfield. This feels, I don't want to say appropriate for Baker Mayfield's story, because I think the appropriate thing would have been for him to be able to at least like play out his contract in Cleveland. But then all of that, like Deshaun Watson pursuit that all of these teams kind of like did front flips over to try to get him on their roster. And that we asked a lot of questions about here on several shows throughout Locked On NFL. And then all of a sudden he gets this opportunity at the end of the season with a losing team, the Los Angeles Rams, going up against, a losing team with the Los Angeles Rams, who also dealing with several injuries, as you noted earlier, going up against a Las Vegas Raiders team that's won 3 straight, looked like they were finally starting to heat up. And then what happens? Baker Mayfield comes in and says, "Why are y'all running press coverage? All right, then here's 23 yards for you and a dub to Van Jefferson." Like, that's... Man, and then he got to take the knee at the end, like the defense held up. He got to take the knee at the end. Like, crazy. Man, like it's a cool story. It's a cool story, but it's not so great for Cleveland Browns fans, I imagine, especially those that are disappointed with the direction that the Browns franchise went this offseason.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating story, and I'll be fascinated to see how it goes. Part of Baker's thing, I think, has been he's had spurts where he's been really good. Ups, downs. Yeah. Right. He's so up and down. He's so inconsistent, which is why, again, I think he's a bust of a first overall pick, but he could still be an NFL quarterback. And as long as he's on a roster that isn't depending on him to do everything and kind of, beat Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, any of those type of guys, I think that he might be, he's serviceable in that way. So, we'll see how he continues with the Rams. I think he's in a good situation right now because there's no pressure on him. Like, the Rams are out. Like, no one's counting on him to carry them to the playoffs or anything like that. So if he does bad, it's like, well, that was a bad team. But if he does well, holy crap, maybe Baker Mayfield, should be the future with this franchise or anything like, or somewhere else. So I think he's in a much better spot. You have a much better coach than Sean McVay. And I'll be really interested to see how he continues to handle the situation. Yeah, he's got some quality games coming up here in that Los Angeles Rams uniform. He'll have the Green Bay Packers next week. Denver Broncos, I know they're struggling, but that defense is still pretty good over there. He's got the Los Angeles Chargers. And then in division, he'll wrap up with the Seattle Seahawks, who have been just a revelation so far this season. So the season will close, Chris, on a Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith battle in the NFC West. How wild is that in the year of our Lord 2022? Well, it'll actually be 2023 by then. It would be. But Dave Damashek, a buddy of mine, who does a lot of great stuff, he pointed out, he was like, imagine if you woke up from a coma after the Rams won the Super Bowl and you saw this game and you're like, Baker what? Yeah. Like he was where? And now he's here? Devontae Adams is on the Raiders. And Devontae Adams being on the Raiders and just like, none of this makes sense. But the wild world of the NFL, man.
Wild world, wild world. And it's been a wild roller coaster of a world for those Las Vegas Raiders, those very Las Vegas Raiders. What does this loss mean, not only for the Raiders, but the AFC playoff odds? And we're going to have to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers here too, Chris, because all of a sudden there's a lane. There's a lane for that 7 seed. And I think somebody said that here on the show not too long ago. So we're going to be breaking all that down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Chris, I'm a huge proponent of therapy. It was something that honestly, coming from our communities, sometimes you're a little bit afraid to talk about going to therapy, needing therapy. Mental health has such a stigma and stuff like that. So to be able to kind of have the resources to take that, you kind of leap over that and be able to kind of get over that hurdle and get the help that you need. It's one thing to admit that you need the help. It's another thing, or that you want the help in some cases, not even a need thing. It's another thing to find the help and find the right fit. And that's what I love about BetterHelp, because BetterHelp, basically you go in, you take a quick questionnaire, and then they use that information, all this sort of about you situation, to get you paired up with a therapist, an online therapist that is a good fit for you. And if they're not, it's free to change, and they make it so much easier. It's the world's largest therapy service. They have matched millions of people with professionally licensed and vested therapists, available 100% online. So it's so much simpler. You don't have to deal with lines. You don't have to deal with, going and meeting people in person. You can do this over the phone. You can do this via video chat. You can even do it through via literally text chat if you don't want to mess around and be seen or anything like that. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can do it. So go and check them out today. Head over to BetterHelp today, and you want to learn more and save 10% on your first month. BetterHelp.com/locked on. That's the site you're going to want to head to. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked on. All right, y'all, continuing on with this episode of Locked On NFL. The Las Vegas Raiders are not the team that they started to look like they were becoming. Now, all of a sudden, the AFC playoff race is wide open. That's what we're breaking down next. We appreciate you so much for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out Locked On Sports today as well, so that you can get all of the news around the world of sports, including something we'll talk about surely over the course of the next week or so, Desmond Ridder becoming the starter and quarterback over in the Atlanta Falcons, or with the Atlanta Falcons. Aaron Freeman was on Locked On Sports today to break that down, giving you the insight that only the Locked On experts can provide. Find that on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Chris, Las Vegas Raiders drop this game. Now, all of a sudden, the AFC playoff race is wide open. And there's a team really, really well that all of a sudden has a bit of a window to get in. And I think you might have talked about that before.
I might have talked about it on the show. I might have told Q, hey, I'm not guaranteeing. I'm just telling you, the Steelers are about to go on some hot streak, and there's going to be some teams in the AFC that start falling. And the Raiders were a team that won a 3-game win streak. I don't know how you blow a 13-point lead in 3 minutes, but they found a way to do it.
Be careful.
And I'm not talking smack about the Raiders, because I picked them to win this game. I thought that they were going to handle their business and take the Rams out. And I thought that with Josh Jacobs, you had a guy who's playing very well. He's playing like one of the best running backs in the NFL. He had 300 yards the other week. Then you have the guy who's the best receiver in the NFL, and Devontae Adams. He's going off. And you got Derek Carr, who's a good veteran quarterback. And then you lay this duck against the Rams when you needed to be on a win streak. And now this was what I was saying could come to pass. And there's a few other things that need to happen for sure. But the Patriots are falling apart. Yep. The Chargers are a huge disappointment. The Jets are starting to fall apart. And you know what? The Ravens, with Lamar Jackson's injury, we have to consider what's the future there for that team. And, they have a stretch of games that if he doesn't play, or if he's not playing very well, they could find themselves losing, and then you're going to have a jumbled up, scramble for 3 wild card spots. Looking at that situation right now, the Ravens are technically the 3 seed right now because they hold the tiebreaker over the Bengals. But the Bengals are playing really good football. The Ravens just eked by the Broncos at 10-9. So right. So now I'm looking at, I think the Dolphins will maintain a trajectory. They'll probably end up being the 5 seed this year, but you got the Ravens needing to hold on. The Jets probably falling off here a bit. The Patriots and the Chargers, and the Browns, we'll see how they play. But, Deshaun Watson, they don't get the Texans every week. So we'll see how they play. They play the Bengals this week. But all of that happens, and the Raiders would have been in prime position. If they won this past week, they'd have been 6-7. They'd be a game. They'd probably be a game behind the Jets at that point. So then you're thinking, because the Jets are playing the Bills this week, I don't think the Bills are going to drop that one. You're probably a game behind the Jets. You're probably 2 games behind the Ravens because they're playing with their backup quarterback this week.
Right.
And there's a legitimate path there. So now with the Raiders falling off, now you're going to question, can they kind of even keep it together to, stay relevant at this point? The Steelers are the team that, and I said, they had the Colts, they had the Falcons, they won those 2 games.
Right.
Now they get the Ravens with a backup quarterback. Then they get the Panthers. Then they get the Raiders. And who are the Raiders going to be in that week? And then they finish the season Ravens and Browns. And it's what I was saying, there was a path for this team, and they're starting to walk into it. They still got to win this weekend. It's not guaranteed or anything, but this AFC wildcard race is wide open.
Yeah. And that's so funny because we knew that the AFC was going to be wild because of teams but we were looking at teams like the Denver Broncos. We were looking at teams like the Los Angeles Chargers. We were looking at teams like the Las Vegas Raiders. We were looking at that AFC West. I remember at the beginning of the season, BetOnline had some odds out there for whether or not all 4 AFC West teams would make the playoffs. That was an actual thing that you could bet on. Now it was plus 1,600, but
right.
but you could bet on it. And so now all of a sudden we're looking at this AFC playoff race being crazy like we expected, but for an entirely different reason. And I think the AFC North has a lot more to do with it than the AFC West. We know what the AFC South is. We know what the AFC East is going to be. But now all of a sudden, Steelers, I'll say Bengals, not so much the Browns, and the Ravens, that's probably the most intriguing race yet again, because we see this year in and year out with this division, keeping the AFC playoff race interesting. Because we kind of thought, all right, well, by week 14, week 15, we'll know what the AFC playoff race is. The NFC is so bad that, we won't know anything going to that, which is still kind of true.
Yeah.
But the AFC has not failed at all to be intriguing. Let me ask you this, just going back to the Raiders for a second.
Sure.
13-point lead. Now, I just covered one of these. Monday night, the Saints did the same thing.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. Just saying, I've seen this movie before. And we've had now both of these games. Dennis Allen and Josh McDaniels, both of these guys have their teams up 13 points in prime time, all that, and then end up dropping the game when it's all said and done. Now, Dennis Allen, Tom Brady did it to him. That's the greatest quarterback of all time. Josh McDaniels, that was Baker Mayfield out there. And like we said, Baker could show you something here toward the end of the season. But as of right now, the public perception of Baker Mayfield, let's just say very different than the public perception of Tom Brady. So do you think with these Las Vegas Raiders that Josh McDaniels could possibly be a one and done after this season?
It's tough I think the Raiders in a rough position. The Davis family is very hard to predict with how they'll handle situations.
That's facts. Yeah.
Ross, but you look at the situation they've been in with John Gruden, then you saw how that played out. Then you go and get Josh McDaniels, which I was just like, why would you go get Josh McDaniels? You've seen what he's done at the head coaching position, but hey, you commit to it. Now it's a matter of if you commit to it further, if you abandon this right now, you put yourself in a situation where it's like, why would anyone go coach the Raiders? Because they're going to be out in a year or two.
Yep.
And so it's kind of like you kind of have to stick with it. I know that they have money to burn over there in Vegas, but rough situation. And I mean, you just see, again, the laxes in this game. It's not just that they get, because it'd be one thing if they had a rookie quarterback and he threw 2 interceptions and that allowed the Rams to wake up. But you get Jerry Tillery, a guy who was a first round pick from another team that you brought in. And after you sack Baker Mayfield on a huge play and you finally when they sacked him on the final drive of the game for the Rams, I thought that was it. I was like, this is over. Then Jerry Tillery smacks the ball out of Baker Mayfield's hand and draws a 15-yard penalty. And now the drive's back a lot.
Right.
And then you had several just boneheaded mistakes. And then you have the coaching being called out by Baker Mayfield, who again had just got there 2 days before. It was not a Ram to start the week. And I'm just like, all of this screams nightmare scenario for the Raiders right now. And again, a team that had a really good running back, the best receiver in football right now. You've invested into a lot of different positions on this team. And for all of this to still be happening, it's just a disaster. I'm not sure. I'm never a fan of firing a guy after a year because I do think coaching needs time to manifest. But my goodness, that is just a disaster. So I will not say fire him immediately. But if I'm the Raiders, I am kicking myself for not going and getting a person who was a new face a person who hadn't gotten an opportunity to be a head coach, and going with a guy who had been a failed head coach and hadn't had any success really anywhere.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm with you. I think either way, I wouldn't blame the Raiders. Like if they want to go for a full on philosophy change, that means you probably have to get like a new regime in there. You could find a way to do it. But also if you want to protect your reputation as a team so that you can pull better coaches later, I 100% see, all right, you got another year, go and make sure you make something happen. Otherwise, after that second year, we're going to, or in the midst of that second year, you know, we out, you know, so I don't blame them. I wouldn't blame them either way. Up next, it is Friday, so it's time for the Friday Pick Six, brought to you by BetOnline. So we're going to be hitting that in a little bit. Chris, did you realize that the Detroit Lions are favored against the Minnesota Vikings?
What is this like?
What are we doing?
I don't know, Ross.
What are we doing here? We're going to tell you why and let you know if you should be riding that line or how you should look at it. We'll get to all that as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On NFL. Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. It is daily fantasy, in my opinion, the way that it should be. It's you versus the house. It's not you and a bunch of mystery lineups all jumping in to try to win some part of a big, $5 million pot or anything like that. Ain't none of that. No spreadsheet wizards, none of that stuff. It's just you, your knowledge of your favorite players, your knowledge of the matchups, your knowledge of the game against the house. All you have to do is pick 2 to 5 players, and you just choose whether or not they're going to come in at more or less than their PrizePicks projection. Yeah, it's that simple. You get those right, and you can win up to 10 times your entry. Not bad, because these only take like 60 seconds to get your entry in. So it's well worth your time. They've got NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL. They got pickleball if you're really looking for it. They got everything all across PrizePicks. Make sure you go and check them out today. Don't forget, for first-time users, you can actually get a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 by simply using the promo code Locked On. Just head over to PrizePicks.com or download the PrizePicks app today. You put $100 down, you get $100. You put $50 down, they'll give you $50. You know how numbers work. It's nice and simple. Head over there today, PrizePicks.com or the PrizePicks app. Use that 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. All right, everybody, we are wrapping up this edition, Friday edition of Locked On NFL. Chris Carter at Carter Critiques on Twitter, Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter here, getting you ready for this weekend's matchup with our Friday Pick Six, brought to you here every Friday by BetOnline, where they've got more odds, lines, and props than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Let's start off here with the Minnesota Vikings, who are going to be taking on the Detroit Lions, getting, that NFC North weirdness that we always love to see. But Chris, the Detroit Lions are actually favored in this game. To help us understand. To help us understand why this is the case. I don't understand. It's so weird. Here's Dave Mason, odds maker over at BetOnline, to lay it all down for us.
Vikings at Lions. This NFC North matchup represents the most interesting line move of the week. With the second best record in the entire NFL, the 10-2 Vikings open as 2.5-point road chalk at the 5-7 Lions. That number quickly moved to a pick'em on Sunday, and on Monday the Lions became favored, currently laying 2 points. This line movement suggests that Minnesota is not as good as their record suggests. Additionally, Detroit is hot lately, 4-1 straight up and 5-0 against the spread over their last 5. The public still believes in the Vikings, as 68% of the bettors are backing them. However, big bettors prefer the Lions. 56% of the cash is on Detroit.
I think I'm with the public on this one. The Minnesota Vikings are my pick for this.
Yeah.
Chris, how does this happen?
I don't know, man. I'm not an expert in searching up betting histories or anything like that. But I can't think of a time when a team that has a record 5 games, they're 5 games behind the opponent, and they are favored to win. By
multiple points.
It'd be different if Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins weren't playing. Then I'd be like, okay, makes sense. Like, all right, I can see the line. The Lions almost upset the Bills. You think that okay, and they're at home, maybe something there. But this is a Vikings team going into a domed environment to play the Detroit Lions, who they've been upstarts. They've found ways to be tough this year. But this isn't a game that I think should be favored at all. I'm picking the Vikings. I'm taking the money. You got that. If you want to give me 2 extra points, fine. That's kind of basically a pick 'em at this point. But But I'm taking the Vikings easily in this matchup.
Yeah.
And like, look, if the Lions win, I wouldn't be totally surprised. But I just think that the points should be on the other side. If you're going to give 2 points to anybody, I'd give 2 points to favor the Vikings in this situation.
Yeah, for sure. This is just wild to me. That's a wild one. And it might not be the weirdest line. Like there are a couple of these that are weird. We'll move on here. We've got this one. This one's near and dear to your heart, my friend, as the host of Locked On Steelers. The Baltimore Ravens at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh favored -2 in this one. Some might call that a little strange too, or at least a little bit unexpected. But the injury to Lamar Jackson's a factor in this, right? How well the Pittsburgh Steelers defense has played here recently since getting TJ Watt back, that is a factor in this. So are you rolling with the home team here in Pittsburgh?
I am. They're playing Lamar Jackson's backup, Tyler Huntley. They faced him before last year and won. I think the Steelers are picking up steam here offensively. They've been running the ball. Kenny Pickett hasn't turned the ball over in 4 weeks. All of that's been really huge for them. I'm not guaranteed. I don't think it's guaranteed that they're going to win, but I do think that they're in a good spot. And this is the first time I think this season that they've been favored on BetOnline. So like it's or at least it's been a while, since they've been in that position. So I think it's interesting that happened. I don't think it would be the case if Lamar was playing, but he didn't practice at all on Wednesday or Thursday. We'll see if that changes Friday, but we don't expect it to, as John Harbaugh came out and said that Lamar Jackson's going to miss 1 to 3 weeks. But, this is going to be an interesting game. The Steelers, their rushing offense has been rushing for pretty much like over 140 yards per game over the last 5 weeks. Yeah. Or the last 5 games, excuse me. And they've been able to pick that up. If they can do that to the number 2 run defense in the NFL, I think that's going to be a big boost for them throughout the end of the season. But Kenny Pickett, the Steelers defense been playing better. They've been able to kind of keep things bottled up. And I think that with Tyler Huntley in there, you're going to be able to just focus on take away the run games. Don't let them run the ball on you. Force this guy to have to heave it to receivers that are, I think mediocre at best right now. Yeah. And let Minkah Fitzpatrick in that secondary win you some matchups.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm with you. I'm actually rolling with the Pittsburgh Steelers here too. I got to see it up close and personal what that defense can do and how they can limit a team that's limited at quarterback. And I think that could be where the Baltimore Ravens are this week. So I'm going to take the Steelers in this one as well. All right. Now we get to the interesting stuff. It's happened once before. Yeah. The New York Jets going up against the Buffalo Bills. This time in Buffalo. Buffalo favored -10. Can the New York Jets find a way to pull off the upset here?
They could, but they're not going to. I think the Bills, they're still ticked about losing that last game. They're going to find a way to. They're going to find a way to win this game. But I will say this: I would take the Jets with the points of 10 points. That's a lot of points for a divisional matchup. There, this is going to be a close game. I think the Bills end up winning by 4, but 10 points. No, I will take the Jets there on the odds that they're going to find a way to keep this game close. This becomes a defensive matchup where both sides are back and forth. I'm intrigued to see how the Bills finish the season without Von Miller. He was a huge get for them and a major resource that they added. Now he's not going to be available to them. And I think it could be interesting how things shake up without him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch which direction the New York Jets quarterback situation goes, right? Like going away from Zach Wilson, going to Mike White, and then Mike White like balling out all of a sudden. Like there was just so many different things that are part of that. So it'll be interesting to see where the quarterback position goes this week. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be bold. I'm going to say that the New York Jets sweep the Buffalo Bills, because why not? Whoa. Why not say it? Why not say it, right? Like, come on. Like, this is too fun for me. Like, I love
Bills Mafia. Get them.
Yeah, I'm saying, I know, and I love Bills Mafia too. Like that's my second home, and so I'm like, man. But at the same time, like, how fun has this division been because the Jets are better than expected?
Yeah,
right?
You're right.
Like, we kind of thought this was just going to be a runaway for the Buffalo Bills and everything. And it kind of still is. Like, it's their division. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But, man, the Jets just make things so much more interesting elsewhere outside of Buffalo. And I think that's great. So I'm going to take the Jets to upset the Buffalo Bills and sweep them. It was a huge thing in the first place for them to even win an AFC East matchup, period, right? They got that done a couple of times, actually, this season. I'm gonna go bold. I'm gonna say the Jets find a way to get the win, and it all comes down to who? Sauce Gardner. That ends up being the difference. That ends up being the difference. I don't know how. Maybe he scores a touchdown. I don't know, but I'm feeling some sauce. Feeling saucy. All right. Philadelphia Eagles. Stop laughing at me. Philadelphia Eagles.
I was trying to hold it in.
Philly
Stop saying saucy, man.
Saucy. I can't. It's too good. Saucy Rousey. I'm ready. All right. Philadelphia Eagles. They're going to be taking on the NFC East rival New York Jets. Philly favored -7. A.J. Brown got a GM fired. This is going to be it's going to be a fun matchup. -7 for Philly. It's another divisional matchup with a big point spread. How do you see this one going?
Man, I think the Giants have done a really good job getting to where they are right now. I think that they get crushed in this one. I do too. I think they come into New York. The Giants are going to be pesky, but the Eagles, they're in no mood to be playing around. They're playing like the best team in football right now. That defensive front is going to eat the Giants alive. I think they create problems for Daniel Jones, and that they find a way to get the win there in this situation by more than a touchdown. Because you're talking about 7 points. Yeah, you're talking about a possession game. I think this is more than that. I think that they find a way to they find a way to win this game. I mean, this is a team that they've only lost one game, and it was to the Commanders who caught them on that one night. Crazy enough, they have the Giants twice in the next month or so here. So that'll set an interesting tone. If the Giants want to stick into this NFC conversation, because that right now they are they're the 6th seed in the NFC. If they want to stick in it, though, they got to win this game, because the Seahawks are right behind them at the 7th seed, and Washington is creeping up on them. So I really think this is important for the Giants, but the Eagles are that good. I think the Giants, they've done a great job to get here. This is just when I start to see them fall off this season. Yeah.
I'm with you. I'm taking the Philadelphia Eagles there to crush them in the Meadowlands. All right, we got two more here that we'll go through quick. This one's kind of weird. Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to take on the San Francisco 49ers. The Brock Purdy-led San Francisco 49ers, but yet the 49ers favored -3.5, -3 points, 3.5 points in this one. Where do you go with this one? Because I think this is Tampa Bay all the way.
Yeah, same here. I think that Tom Brady is doing Tom Brady things. You saw it live last week against the Saints. And if this was Jimmy Garoppolo, I would be picking the Niners.
Sure.
And not because Jimmy Garoppolo would just drop 50 points on the Buccaneers, but because he would manage the game situation. That's what Jimmy Garoppolo does so well. He knows when to take risks, when not to take risks, when to let the rest of his roster win games. So I think that's something that Brock Purdy, you're talking about Mr. Irrelevant. The guy, literally the last pick of the NFL draft this year. Yeah. If Tom Brady lost to a rookie Mr. Irrelevant, he loses all of his Super Bowl rings, all of his MVPs. Take them all away. He never earned them in the first place. Spygate's real. The Deflategate, all of it. It's out. You can't lose to Brock Purdy. That's why I'm picking the Buccaneers. Tom Brady will not let that happen.
Can't let that happen. All right, last one here. Sunday Night Football. Miami -3 against the Los Angeles Chargers. I like the way this one's going. I'm going Miami.
Yeah, I'm going Miami too. They're just a better football team. The Chargers have been too inconsistent this year. The Chargers, man. And Q and I talked about this, before the season. Every year when the Chargers get like a little bit of talent, everyone's like, they're going to the Super Bowl. And I'm just like, why?
Every time.
It's been this way since Drew Brees was on the roster way back in the mid-2000s. So, they did it with Phil Rivers for years. No, I don't buy them. I do buy the Dolphins. I think they're a better team. They get a win.
Yeah, absolutely. The team that got in trouble for tampering with Tom Brady and Sean Payton helps us solidify Sean Payton's next home with the Los Angeles Chargers. That's the way I'm looking at this. We appreciate y'all, as always. Make a Locked On NFL your first listen of the day, every day. Come back on Monday. Kevin Oshreck is going to have everything you need from the biggest stories of the weekend with the Locked On local experts breaking it all down for you. Chris, absolute pleasure, my friend, being able to join you for this Friday episode.
Same here.
I really appreciate y'all coming through. Make sure you also, for your second listen, go and check out Locked On Sports Today. Get all the news around the world of sports from the Locked On local experts on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. For Chris Carter, I am Ross Jackson. This has been Locked On NFL. We'll see you again here soon as part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.